They said her murder would break us. They were wrong. It was the single biggest mistake in galactic history, and it all started with a simple glass of wine. President Margaret Stone, a 52-year-old woman with graying hair and more hope than sense, was about to toast to a future that would never happen. She thought she was building a bridge to the stars for humanity. But the aliens just saw an underdog, and they were about to put her down. If you think this is just another story of humanity getting knocked down, stick around and see how we get back up. "Maggie, you look nervous," Dr. Lisa Carter, her chief advisor and oldest friend, whispered. Lisa was the dreamer, the one who saw alien technology as a library of wonders just waiting to be opened. "A little," Margaret confessed, her fingers tracing the Earth flag pin on her uniform. This meeting was 30 years in the making. 30 years of being ignored, called primitive, emotional children by the Galactic Council. But Maggie's passionate speeches about unity had finally cracked their stone-faced indifference. Commander Jake Martinez, a man built like a reinforced bulkhead, stepped into the room. His face was all sharp angles and duty. "Madam President, we arrive at Kepler Station in 6 hours. Captain Bell has triple-checked all security protocols." "Walk me through the welcoming committee again," Margaret asked Lisa over their final meal on the starship Harmony. Lisa pulled up the files. First, the Zephyrians, big shots of the galaxy ruling over 200 worlds. Their leader, Chancellor Vexy, is a proud, blue-skinned giant who probably thinks we're a lower life form. Next, the hegemony, led by Admiral Krell. Imagine a 7-foot-tall lizard with a battleship and a bad attitude. They respect one thing: strength. They see us as weak. Margaret's brow furrowed, and the last ones, the Athetherans, spooky, ghost-like beings led by Matriarch Salandre. They play the part of wise, peaceful mystics, but intelligence reports say that's just a very convincing act. "I don't like it, ma'am," Jake said, joining them. His voice was a low rumble. For 3 decades, they wouldn't even answer our calls. Now they roll out the red carpet. Something's not right. "It's a risk we have to take, Jake," Margaret replied gently. "A seat on the council means protection, technology, a future for our children that isn't confined to one small blue planet." Just then, Captain Ryan Bell, her personal guard, entered. The man was a silent shadow who had taken 3 bullets for her over the years. His hand never strayed from the pistol at his side. "Report, Captain," Jake ordered. "All systems are green. Alien ships are maintaining the agreed-upon distance. No weapon ports are open." Ryan's voice was steady, but his eyes never stopped scanning. Margaret looked at her small, loyal family. Lisa, the hopeful scientist. Jake, the unbreakable shield. Ryan, the ever-watchful guardian. "No matter what tomorrow brings," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "serving with you all has been the greatest honor of my life." The next morning, Kepler Station filled their viewports. It wasn't a station, it was a metal continent, a city in the void where ships from 1,000 worlds were docked like strange metallic insects. "Breathtaking," Lisa whispered. "Intimidating," Jake grunted back. The shuttle touched down in a hangar that made their own starship feel like a toy. Alien vessels that looked more like living sea creatures than machines towered over them. The air in the corridors was a bizarre cocktail of 100 different atmospheres. With Jake on one side and Ryan on the other, Margaret walked toward the Great Hall. The chamber was so vast it felt like open space, with a ceiling that glittered with what looked like captured stars. Hundreds of alien beings filled the tiered seats, their whispers a chorus of clicks, chirps, and hums. On a raised dais sat 3 thrones. Chancellor Vexy was even more imposing up close, his golden eyes filled with disdain. Admiral Krell's lipless mouth pulled back in a smirk, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, and Matriarch Salandre watched them with a chilling, serene emptiness. "So the children of Earth have finally come to beg at our table," Vexy's voice boomed. Margaret's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. "We come as equals, Chancellor, hoping to join a council of civilized worlds." "Equals?" Krell let out a grating laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Your species is a mere blink in the eye of history. We have ruled these stars since before your ancestors discovered fire." "Wisdom isn't measured in years, Admiral," Margaret shot back, "and power without empathy is nothing more than galactic bullying." A hush fell over the massive hall. Apparently, no one talked back to the big three. Salandra leaned forward, her voice a soft hiss. "You speak of empathy, human, yet your own history is filled with war." "Because we learned from it," Margaret declared, stepping forward. Ryan's muscles coiled, ready to spring. "We learned that strength is not about conquering others, but about conquering ourselves." She then delivered the speech of a lifetime. It wasn't about politics or power. It was about the dreams of the children on Earth who looked at the night sky and hoped they weren't alone. She spoke for 20 minutes, and by the end, some of the aliens actually looked thoughtful. The three leaders conferred in whispers. Finally, Vexy stood. "A pretty sentiment, human. Let us drink to your effort." Servants brought out ornate glasses filled with a glowing blue liquid. "To new friendships," Margaret said, raising her glass in a gesture of peace. The entire hall echoed the sentiment. As the rim of the glass touched her lips, Ryan's voice ripped through the air. "No!" An almost invisible beam of energy shot from Vexy's throne, striking her in the chest. The glass shattered as she collapsed, a look of pure shock on her face. Lisa screamed, catching her friend as she fell. "Maggie, stay with me!" Margaret's vision was fading, but she saw Vexy standing above her, a tiny smoking weapon in his hand. "A tragic accident," he announced calmly. "These old ceremonial devices can be so unreliable." With her last ounce of strength, Margaret grabbed Lisa's hand. "Tell Earth," she gasped. "Tell them we didn't bend." And then she was gone. The Mother of Earth, murdered in cold blood. Ryan drew his weapon, but it was too late. Dozens of alien guards had them surrounded. Jake was already on his comms, shouting for an emergency extraction. As they carried Margaret's body from the hall, Vexy allowed himself a small, cruel smile. He believed he had just ended the human threat. In reality, he had just signed his own death warrant. He had shown humanity that the galaxy was a dark and dangerous place. He was about to find out that they could be dangerous too. 3 days later, her flag-draped coffin was carried down the ramp of the Harmony onto Earth's soil. Billions watched in heartbroken silence. Beside the coffin walked a devastated Lisa Carter, a furious Jake Martinez, and a haunted Ryan Bell, who felt he had failed in his one sacred duty. Waiting for them at the bottom of the ramp was Vice President Patricia Hayes. At 60 years old, the former 4-star general had eyes like blue ice. The Constitution said she was president now, but she felt more like a soldier about to march into hell. "Welcome home, Maggie," Patricia whispered as the coffin was carried past. At the funeral, leaders from across the globe sat beside ordinary people who had lined the streets for miles, holding handmade signs and weeping for the woman who promised them a peaceful future. An alien observer sent by the council watched from the back, tasked with gauging humanity's broken spirit. He was about to get his answer. Patricia stepped to the podium. "Margaret Stone went to the stars seeking friendship," she began. "She believed the galaxy was ready for peace. She was wrong. But she was right about something more important, the strength of the human spirit. She believed that when faced with monsters, we do not run. We do not cower. We fight." Patricia's voice rose from a whisper to a roar. "The cowards who murdered our president believe this act has weakened us. They are about to receive a lesson in human history. A lesson written in fire and fury. The crowd didn't just cheer, they roared, a single unified cry of defiance that echoed across the planet. The age of diplomacy was over. The age of retribution had just begun. The alien observers squirmed in their seats. Down in the secure bunker beneath the Capitol, Patricia, the new president, met with Jake, Lisa, and Ryan just after the funeral. They weren't alone. At the head of the table sat Admiral Kevin Ross, a man so deep in the shadows most people didn't even know he existed. "Madam President," Admiral Ross said, his voice gravelly, "it's time you knew what we've really been doing for the last 30 years. He flicked on a holographic map of the solar system. But this wasn't the map of peaceful research outposts everyone knew. This map was littered with massive, hidden weapons platforms. While Margaret was talking peace, Ross explained, we were preparing for war. Every diplomatic mission was a chance to grab their tech. Every trade deal gave us a backdoor into their computer systems. Every cultural exchange was a lesson in their weaknesses. Lisa just stared at the hologram, her face pale with shock. You've been spying on them this entire time. We've been learning, Ross shot back. Did you really think we'd trust species that have called us primitives for 3 decades? Did you expect us to leave Earth defenseless while we begged them for a seat at the table? Jake leaned forward, his eyes locked on the display. What exactly are you showing us? Ross allowed himself a grim smile. The Sol defense grid, 50 weapons platforms, all disguised as science stations. Each one has enough firepower to vaporize an entire battle fleet, and that's just for starters. The image shifted, revealing secret shipyards tucked away in asteroid fields and on the dark side of moons. Hundreds of warships were being built, a fusion of brilliant human engineering and reverse-engineered alien science. How many ships? Patricia asked, her voice steady. 3,000 are combat-ready, 5,000 more are on the way, and they're unlike anything the aliens have ever seen. Ryan finally spoke up, skeptical. They'll detect them the second they power up. No, they won't. Ross keyed another display. Dr. Carter, I'd like you to meet Dr. Alex Turner, the head of our stealth program. A thin man with anxious eyes stepped into the light. We cracked the detection problem, he said nervously. Our ships are completely invisible to all known alien sensors. They can't see us coming. They can't track our weapons. They won't even know we're there until it's far too late. Lisa just shook her head in disbelief. This is madness. You're talking about starting a war with half the galaxy. They started the war when they murdered our president, Patricia said, her voice turning to ice. We're going to finish it. Ross brought up the latest intelligence files. The triumvirate thinks they've broken us. They're already moving fleets to our borders. Vexati is bragging about how easy it was to take out our leader. Krell is planning a full-scale invasion of Earth within 6 months. Let them come, Patricia said. They're about to find out what humanity is really made of. For the next month, Earth prepared for war in total secrecy. The alien observers on Earth filed reports that the humans seemed shattered and leaderless. They watched the mourning crowds and angry protests, assuming the planet was tearing itself apart. They couldn't have been more wrong. In hidden bunkers and secret factories all over the globe, the machines of war ran 24 hours a day. The new stealth ships were armed with missiles designed to slice through alien shields. Soldiers drilled constantly for boarding actions and planetary assaults. Scientists worked around the clock, turning the aliens' own technology against them. Lisa soon found herself in charge of a research team that had been studying alien weaknesses for decades. Every species has a fatal flaw, she told her people. The Zephyrians are too arrogant to cooperate. The hegemony is completely dependent on their computer networks. The Etherians think they're too clever to ever be tricked. Captain Bell was given command of a brand new unit, the Ghost Regiment, soldiers trained to fight in the dark, to strike without warning and vanish before the enemy could even sound an alarm. "We're not just fighting for revenge," Bell told his troops. "We're fighting to make damn sure no other species ever has to watch their leader get assassinated while trying to build a peaceful future." Jake was promoted to admiral and given command of the new attack fleets. His mission: coordinate the single largest military operation in human history. He pored over alien fleet positions, planning surgical strikes that would cripple their ability to fight back. "They killed Margaret because they saw us as weak," he told his officers. "We're going to show them a kind of strength they can't even comprehend." Meanwhile, Patricia stood before the United Earth Assembly. The aliens were listening in, expecting a speech of surrender or a desperate plea for mercy. "Fellow humans," she began, "our president died trying to create a better future for us all. The aliens who took her from us think they've won. They think we'll crawl back to our home world and hide like scared children." She paused, her eyes finding the alien observers in the gallery. "They are about to learn that our greatest strength was never one person. It was our unity. It was our resolve. It was our absolute refusal to ever give up." Her voice dropped, becoming as cold as deep space. Margaret Stone believed in peace, but she also believed in justice. "Today, we choose justice. Today, we choose to show this galaxy what happens when you murder the innocent." The assembly hall exploded with applause. The alien observers scrambled to send frantic messages home. Earth wasn't broken. Earth was getting ready for a fight. But by the time the message got through, it was already far too late. The ghost ships were already gliding through the void, silent and lethal. The orbital platforms were already locking onto their targets. The soldiers were already boarding their transports. Margaret Stone had died trying to make peace. Now, humanity would make war, and the galaxy would be forever changed. The aliens had made one fatal mistake. They thought that by killing Earth's leader, they would end the human threat. Instead, they had just woken up a sleeping giant that would not stop until justice was served. 6 months after President Stone's murder, the rest of the galaxy was convinced that Earth was a shattered power. The alien news network ran stories showing empty human embassies and abandoned trading posts. The official narrative was that the humans had retreated to their home system like a wounded animal. On the Xerian capital world, Chancellor Vexati stood in his war room, staring at a map of the local sector. Red icons marked his fleets, positioned perfectly around Earth's borders. He was moments away from giving the final order to attack. "The humans are broken," he declared to his generals. "Their pathetic leader is dead, and they have no fight left. We will take their world and turn them into slaves." On his flagship, Admiral Krell was holding a similar meeting. His massive hegemony warship, bristling with weapons, cruised toward Earth's outer colonies. "Humans are weak," Krell growled at his officers. "They weep over a single dead female. When we strike, they will surrender before a shot is even fired." But the aliens were wrong about everything. Miles away in the silent dark, Captain Amy Foster sat in the command chair of the stealth ship Phantom. On the bridge around her, the crew worked in hushed tones. They had been shadowing the Zephyran fleet for 3 months, completely invisible and undetected. Amy was 35 years old, one of the best pilots in the entire human fleet. She had begged to join the Ghost Fleet because she wanted to be the first one to strike back at Margaret's killers. "Captain," her weapons officer whispered, "we are in position. All ghost ships are reporting ready." Amy glanced at her tactical display. 50 human ships had the Zephyran fleet completely surrounded, and the aliens had absolutely no clue. The stealth technology was flawless. "Remember the mission," Amy said to her crew, her voice low and steady. No survivors, no witnesses, no evidence. When we are done here, it will look like they simply vanished. At that very moment, deep beneath Earth's surface, Admiral Jake Martinez watched his command center. Dozens of screens tracked the real-time position of every single alien ship in the sector. For months, humanity had been watching and waiting. All ghost fleets report ready, sir, his aide announced. Jake thought of Margaret and how she had died trying to secure peace. There would be no peace now, only justice. Execute Operation Phantom Strike, he commanded. The first target on the list was the Zephyrin forward base at Riel Prime, a heavily defended station holding 1,000 aliens who thought they were perfectly safe. Captain Foster's ship blinked into existence, its weapons already blazing. The station's shields shattered in seconds. Instantly, more ghost ships materialized, pouring fire onto the base from every conceivable angle. The Zephyrins frantically tried to send a distress call, but human jammers blanketed their communications. They tried to launch their fighter squadrons, but the ghost ships obliterated them before they could even clear the launch bays. In less than 10 minutes, Riel Prime ceased to exist. It wasn't just damaged or captured. It was completely erased. When the blinding light faded, there was nothing left but empty space. That same scene was repeated all across the galaxy. Zephyrin outposts, hegemony supply depots, and Etherian communication hubs just vanished. The alien commanders got no warnings, no demands for surrender, and no explanations. One minute their assets were there, and the next they were gone. In her secret lab deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Dr. Lisa Carter went to work. She and her team had spent months finding ways to crack alien computer networks. Now, it was time to put that knowledge to use. We're inside their entire comms network, she announced to her team. They can't send a single message without us knowing about it. On her main screen, she watched the ripple of pure panic spread through the alien fleets as admirals screamed for reinforcements that were never going to come. They murdered our president while she was extending a hand in peace, and then they had the nerve to laugh about it. They thought we were weak, an entire species of underdogs just begging for scraps from their table. But for 30 years, while we were talking peace, we were also preparing for war. If you think you know how this story of revenge ends, stick around, because you're about to be shocked. Captain Ryan Bell and his Ghost Regiment team moved like shadows through the captured Zephyrin cruiser. They'd slipped aboard at a space station, neutralized the crew without a sound, and seized control before anyone even knew they were there. "The bridge is ours," Bell whispered into his comms. "Crew is gone. Not a single alarm tripped. The ship's computers were a gold mine, fleet movements, battle plans, but it was the personal logs that caught his eye. He opened one from a Zephyrin officer to his kid. It said, 'This little war with the humans will be over before you know it. We're going to take their planet and teach them a lesson for ever thinking they could sit on the council.'" They had actually celebrated the assassination of President Stone. Now, they were going to get their lesson. Bell deleted the message. Back on Earth, President Patricia Hayes stood before her top commanders. The opening act of the war was flawless. The aliens were in a state of panic, totally baffled as their forces were systematically erased. "What's our butcher's bill?" she asked. "Zero," Admiral Ross replied, his voice firm. "We haven't lost a single soldier or ship. The ghost fleets are exceeding every expectation." "And theirs? Roughly 50,000 enemy casualties," Ross confirmed. 12 of their major bases have been turned to dust. What's left of their forward fleets are scrambling back to their home systems." Patricia gave a grim nod. "They wanted to see what happens when you poke the bear." Well, the bear was wide awake now. The alien response was exactly as predicted. Chancellor Vexy, his normally blue face drained of color, slammed his fists on the table at an emergency meeting of the triumvirate. "How is this possible?" he shrieked. "Our sensors see nothing. Our fleets are being torn apart by phantoms." Admiral Krell, a hulking reptilian, was just as lost. "It makes no sense. Humans are a primitive race. They don't possess this kind of technology." Matriarch Salandre, ever the calm one, finally spoke, her pale eyes betraying her deep unease. "It seems we have gravely underestimated them." "Underestimated them?" Vexy bellowed. "They're insects. They can barely manage space travel." "Insects," Salandra countered coolly, "that have just wiped out a quarter of our forward fleet." A horrifying truth was starting to dawn on the alien leaders. The humans they'd mocked as weak and backward had been playing a long game, hiding their true power for 30 years, all while pretending to beg for acceptance. They'd been gearing up for this exact moment. Miles away, Captain Foster's ghost ship materialized near another Zephyran installation. This time, the aliens thought they were prepared. They had scanners sweeping for cloaked vessels and every weapon on high alert. It made no difference. The human ships weren't just invisible, they were smarter. Humanity had spent decades studying alien strategies, and now they were using that knowledge against them. The base's defenses blasted away at empty coordinates, while the ghost ships dismantled them from impossible angles. Within minutes, another enemy fortress was reduced to rubble. This exact scenario was repeating itself all across the galaxy. Alien armadas that were poised to invade Earth were now desperately fighting for their own survival against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't comprehend. The hunters were now the hunted. Admiral Martinez watched the reports flood in. The alien fleets were in full retreat, their commanders paralyzed by fear. The so-called mighty triumvirate was getting a crash course in human resolve. "Phase 1 is complete," he announced to his staff. "All enemy forward positions are neutralized. Ghost fleets, proceed to Phase 2 coordinates." And Phase 2 was going to be personal. No more hitting military targets. Now, they were going after the leaders themselves. The very individuals who ordered President Stone's murder were about to get a taste of real justice. But before that, they were going to get a taste of fear. They were about to learn what it feels like to be stalked by an enemy who can be anywhere, at any time, and strike without a single warning. Margaret Stone had died fighting for peace. Now, her people were about to show the galaxy what happens when you kill an innocent woman whose only crime was wanting to build a better universe. The aliens had woken something terrifying inside of humanity. And that terrifying thing was just warming up. The triumvirate's retreat quickly turned into an all-out rout as humanity finally showed its hand. What the aliens had dismissed as a few random ghost ship attacks was revealed to be a brilliantly orchestrated campaign to obliterate their entire military might. In Earth's central war room, Admiral Jake Martinez watched as red icons vanished from the holographic star maps. Each blink represented another alien base that had ceased to exist. His officers moved with quiet efficiency, conducting the biggest military operation the galaxy had ever seen. "Status update," Jake commanded. "Ghost Fleet Alpha has eliminated the Hegemony Supply Depot at Wolf 359, his aide reported crisply. "Ghost Fleet Beta just took out the Zephyran shipyard at Vega." For 8 long months, the Athatheran Empire had treated them like a joke, a tiny band of human survivors out for petty revenge. Now, as Ghost Fleet Gamma slipped toward the command post at Proxima, Commander Jake knew it was time to drop the act. He leaned forward, the light from the console glinting in his eyes. "Open a channel to every human ship in the galaxy," he ordered, his voice steady. "It's time they learned who they've been messing with." In an instant, 1,000 ghost fleets flickered into reality. Across the void, screens that showed empty space were suddenly flooded with the terrifying silhouettes of human warships. On the Athetheran bridge, Chancellor Vexthy watched the impossible unfold. The deep blue of his skin turned a sickly, pale shade. "No," he breathed, stumbling back. 1,000 ships. How could we not have seen them? His intelligence chief, General Zorak, was shaking so badly he could barely stand. "Sir," Zorak stammered, "our report said Earth had maybe 50 warships left. This means they've been building in secret for decades." Vexthy's voice was a roar of disbelief. "Decades? While we were laughing them out of our peace talks, they were building an armada." But the truth was so much worse. Every diplomatic mission the humans had ever sent was a cover for engineers to steal their tech. Every trade deal was a carefully planned operation to acquire critical weapon components. Every cultural exchange was a chance to study their weaknesses. Suddenly, President Patricia Hayes appeared on every screen in triumvirate space. Her face was perfectly calm, but her eyes blazed with a cold fire that had been smoldering for a generation. "To the people of the galaxy," she began, her voice echoing with quiet power. "8 months ago, your leaders assassinated President Margaret Stone in the middle of a peace summit. They mocked our pain. They called us weak. They called us primitive." She let the words hang in the air. "Today, you learn the truth. We are not weak. We are not primitive. And we never, ever forget the murder of an innocent." As she spoke, human fleets materialized, surrounding the most critical planets in the triumvirate. The aliens' most formidable strongholds were suddenly staring down the barrels of an overwhelming human force. Captain Amy Foster commanded the Ghost Fleet bearing down on Dominion Falls, the hegemony's crown jewel fortress world. The planet was wrapped in energy shields thought to be impenetrable, its surface bristling with cannons and missile silos. Admiral Krell himself was planetside, personally overseeing the defense. "Captain," her weapons officer reported, "their shields are juiced to maximum. They're trying to hail their other fleets for support." Amy allowed herself a grim smile. A little late for that. Their other fleets are now scrap metal. She turned to her main view screen. "Dr. Carter, you're up." Dr. Lisa Carter's face appeared from her lab back on Earth, surrounded by humming banks of repurposed alien computers. "We're ready, Captain," Lisa said with a confident grin. "Let's show them what happens when you give your tech to people you're dumb enough to underestimate." Lisa's fingers danced across her console. The machines she'd built were designed to speak the native electronic language of every alien system and to become their new master. Down on Dominion Falls, Admiral Krell watched in pure horror as his own defenses turned on each other. The massive gun emplacements designed to protect the planet swiveled inward and began blasting away at their own shield generators. "What is happening?" Krell shrieked at his technicians. "Sir, we're locked out. Something's taken control of our own weapons grid." "That's impossible. Our security is flawless." But it wasn't flawless to a species that had spent 30 years finding its every crack and loophole. Lisa's program didn't just hack the alien network. It turned their own strength into their biggest weakness. The planet's once mighty shields buckled and collapsed under a relentless barrage from its own guns. Captain Foster's fleet glided in for the final strike, but they never had to fire a single shot. The fortress world surrendered without a fight, its defenders too stunned and betrayed by their own technology to even think of resisting. It was the same story all across triumvirate space. On the ether and science world of New Atlantis, human hackers unleashed the aliens' own classified experiments against them. On Zaffiran military outposts, Captain Ryan Bell's ground teams walked onto bases where the automated security systems had already neutralized the defenders for them. It started with a whisper, then a complete shutdown. One by one, door locks sealed alien soldiers inside their own barracks. Command centers went dark as life support systems winked out. Across the Empire, communication arrays that once barked out alien orders were suddenly broadcasting a single, chilling demand for surrender, in perfect English. "This is impossible," General Zorro stammered to Chancellor Vexthy. "How can they control our technology better than we do?" Vexthy had no answer. The mighty Zaharian civilization, rulers of the galaxy for 1,000 years, were being dismantled by a species they'd arrogantly dismissed as children. On every screen in the Zephyrian capital, President Hayes appeared, her face calm but her eyes like steel. Her message was simple. "Chancellor Vexthy, you have a choice. Surrender now, and we will show your people mercy. Keep fighting, and we will show you what human anger truly looks like." But Vexthy's pride was a fortress. "Never," he snarled. "We are Zephyrians. We do not bow to lesser beings." "So be it," Hayes replied, and her image vanished. What came next would forever be known as the Night of Falling Stars. Every single Zephyrian military ship, station, and outpost in the galaxy just stopped. Mighty warships lost all power, drifting like cosmic tombstones. Space stations became silent, dark mausoleums. Their entire communications network fell dead. Back on Earth, Dr. Carter had found the master key, the central control system that ran everything Zaharian. With just a few lines of code, she had single-handedly disarmed an entire civilization. "Magnificent," Admiral Martinez breathed, watching the reports flood in. "We just won a war without a single civilian casualty." But the humans weren't even close to being done. They had one more lesson to teach. Across the galaxy, the three most powerful leaders, Vexthy, Krell, and Salandra, received the same message at the exact same time. President Hayes materialized on their private, supposedly unhackable communication systems. "Leaders of the Triumvirate," she said, her voice cool and steady. "You wanted to see human technology in action. You wanted to test our resolve. Well, you got your wish." Behind her, the star-dusted view of Earth's solar system shimmered and changed. But instead of the quaint research outposts the aliens expected, the screen revealed a terrifying network of massive weapon platforms, all aimed directly at them. "This," Hayes announced, "is the Sol defense grid. 50 weapon platforms," she explained, "and each one can crack your largest dreadnoughts like an egg. We built them while you were laughing at our peace treaties." The display kept shifting, revealing even more secrets. Hidden shipyards nestled in asteroid belts, weapon factories humming on distant moons, and elite training bases where human soldiers had been preparing for this very war their entire lives. "You murdered our president because you thought we were weak." Hayes's voice cut through their stunned silence. "You planned to invade our home because you thought we were helpless. You were wrong about everything." Vexthy, Krell, and Salandre could only watch in dawning horror as the sheer scale of humanity's hidden power was laid bare. While they had been dismissing Earth as a primitive backwater, humanity had secretly built the most advanced military in the galaxy. "You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally," Hayes declared. "After that, we stop being merciful." The transmission cut out, leaving the three alien rulers in a profound, terrified silence. In less than 1 year, humanity had gone from pleading for a seat at the table to owning the entire house. Margaret Stone's dream of peace was gone, but in its place, her people had forged something far more powerful: fear. And that fear was spreading through the galaxy like a shockwave. The 48-hour deadline came and went, not a single word from the triumvirate leaders. Chancellor Vexthy, Admiral Krell, and Matriarch Salandra had let their pride choose their fate. Now, they were about to learn the price of that choice. President Patricia Hayes stood in the very room where Margaret Stone had planned her peace mission a year earlier. But instead of planning for diplomacy, Patricia was about to end a war. "Admiral Martinez," she said, her voice unshakable, "execute final operations." The admiral gave a solemn nod and turned to his comms officer. "Send the signal to all fleets. Operation Thunderstrike is a go." All across the galaxy, human ghost fleets began to move, converging on the three triumvirate homeworlds. These weren't just random attacks. This was the final, undeniable demonstration of human power. Captain Amy Foster watched her view screen as Earth's largest fleet dropped out of warp over Zaya Prime, the glittering heart of Vexthi's empire. The planet was a jewel, with swirling blue oceans and silver cities that shone under the light of twin suns. It was also protected by the most powerful defensive weapons ever built. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, his voice tight, "planetary defense grid is online. They have enough firepower to vaporize this entire fleet." Amy just smiled. "Dr. Carter, you ready to give them one last lesson?" On Earth, Lisa Carter sat at her console, tears glistening in her eyes. She thought of Margaret, of how her friend had died trying to build bridges, not weapons. "Ready, Amy?" Lisa whispered. "Initiating system override in 3, 2, 1. On Zaya Prime, every single defense system simply went dead. The colossal orbital cannons, each capable of shattering a moon, froze in place. The planet-wide shield generators flickered once, then died. Every communication array that connected the world to its vast empire went dark. Chancellor Vexthi stood in his palace, watching in utter disbelief as his civilization's greatest weapons turned themselves off. Around him, his top advisors were scrambling in a panic, shouting into dead comms, trying to understand how the humans had seized control of literally everything. "Sir," General Zorak said, his voice trembling, "all systems are under their control. We can't even open the doors without their permission." Vexthi's blue face had gone chalk white. "How is this possible? We are the masters of technology." "Apparently not anymore," a new voice echoed through the hall. The Chancellor spun around to see Captain Ryan Bell standing calmly in his throne room. Behind Bell stood a dozen human soldiers in sleek black armor, their weapons held at a relaxed ready. They had appeared out of thin air in the most secure building on the entire planet. "How did you get in here?" Vexthi sputtered. "We walked," Bell said with a shrug. "Your security systems work for us now." The exact same scene was playing out on the other two triumvirate worlds. Admiral Krell found human soldiers waiting for him in his deepest command bunker. Matriarch Salandre was shocked to discover that her own personal guards were actually human agents who had been shadowing her for months. In a single, silent, brilliant move, the three most powerful beings in the galaxy had become prisoners in their own homes. President Hayes appeared on every screen in triumvirate space. Flanking her were the flags of 1,000 worlds that had secretly joined the human alliance over the past year. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began. "1 year ago, your leaders murdered President Margaret Stone during a peace summit. They laughed at our offers of friendship. They planned to invade our world and make us their slaves." She paused, her gaze piercing the camera. "Today, those leaders will stand trial for their crimes, not under some forgotten alien law, but under human justice." The trials were broadcast live to every planet, every ship, every outpost. Billions of beings watched as Chancellor Vexthi, Admiral Krell, and Matriarch Salandra were brought before a human court. The evidence was crushing. There was video of Vexthi himself firing the weapon that killed Margaret. There were communication intercepts that detailed months of careful planning for the assassination. There were personal messages between the three of them, dripping with contempt for all human life. "We were protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species," Vexthy argued weakly in his own defense. "By murdering a woman who came in peace," the human prosecutor shot back. "By planning to invade a world that had never once threatened you?" The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict was unanimous. All three leaders were found guilty of murder, conspiracy, and crimes against peace. The sentences were carried out without delay. With their arrogant leaders gone, the triumvirate civilizations surrendered unconditionally. Their massive militaries laid down their arms. Their governments pleaded for mercy from the very species they had tried so eagerly to destroy. President Hayes proved to be generous in her victory. She had no desire for revenge against ordinary people who were simply following orders. Instead, she offered them something their old leaders never could: a chance to join a real galactic community, one built on peace. "We will not rule you," she announced to the former triumvirate worlds. "We will not enslave you. We will offer you the same thing we offered your leaders 1 year ago: partnership, friendship, and mutual respect." Many species accepted right away. Others took time to get used to the new reality. But every single one of them understood the message loud and clear. The age of bullies and conquerors was over. The age of human leadership had just begun. Dr. Lisa Carter was named head of the new Galactic Science Council. Her very first act was to share humanity's advanced medical technology with species the old regime had left to suffer. Diseases that had plagued entire worlds for centuries were wiped out in months. Captain Foster became the first commander of the unified galactic peace fleet, her ghost ships now patrolling the spaceways as invisible guardians of justice, ensuring no world would ever again face unprovoked attack. Captain Bell created the Diplomatic Protection Service, a force dedicated to making sure that future peace talks would actually be peaceful. The murder of a diplomat was now the single most serious crime in galactic law. Admiral Martinez was promoted to Supreme Commander of all Allied forces, but his job was no longer about making war. It was about preventing it, making sure any potential aggressor knew exactly what would happen if they stepped out of line. 1 year after the trials, President Hayes returned to Kepler Station for a very different ceremony. Representatives from 300 worlds had gathered to dedicate the Margaret Stone Memorial, built on the exact spot where she had died. The memorial was simple: a statue of Margaret, her hands outstretched in friendship, surrounded by the smiling figures of children from dozens of different species. At its base were her last words, now a testament to her legacy: "Tell them we tried." "She tried to make peace with words," President Hayes declared at the dedication. "When that failed, we made peace with strength." The galaxy feels safer now because she gave everything, and will keep it that way by staying vigilant. As the ceremony wrapped up, the camera panned out, revealing the colossal human fleet hanging in the void around the station. The ships weren't hiding anymore. They were a promise and a warning, floating in the silent dark. The final shot showed a new alien delegation arriving on Earth, begging for humanity's help against their aggressive neighbors. They didn't come as equals looking for an alliance, but as subjects pleading for protection from their superiors. The receptionist who met them was polite, but her tone was unmistakable. "Earth will review your petition, but you should know we take the safety of peaceful species very, very seriously. Anyone who threatens the innocent will learn to regret it." The era of human weakness was a memory. The age of human power had just dawned. And across the stars, Margaret Stone's dream of peace was finally real, shielded by the might of the species that had cherished her most. The aliens had wanted to know what humans were capable of. Well, now they knew, and they would never, ever forget. The asteroid field was a sprawling, endless graveyard of mountain-sized rocks adrift in the freezing emptiness of space. Some were packed with rare metals that could fuel a starship for a generation. Others were seeded with crystals that bent space and made faster-than-light travel a reality. They called it the Kepler Drift, and for 3 grueling years it had been a place of nothing but blood and fire. From the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Fang, General Thakmore watched enemy ships dart between the asteroids like venomous insects. His sharp yellow eyes followed their every move as his clawed hands tightened on the cold metal railing. The Kreks had been at war with the Thine for so long, he knew their attack patterns by heart. But still, they just kept coming. The Kreks were a people forged for war. Their homeworld's gravity was so intense it made their bones as dense as granite. Volcanoes constantly spewed poison into the air, a toxic cocktail that would kill almost any other life form. Only the toughest Kreks even made it to adulthood, and every survivor became a warrior without peer in the galaxy. Thakmore's scales were a roadmap of scars from 100 different battles, each one a testament to surviving against all odds. His people had learned a simple, brutal lesson. Only the ruthless live to see their children grow up. Mercy was a weakness. Compromise was a death sentence. Enemy bioships closing in from Sector 7, his tactical officer reported. The young Krex's voice was perfectly calm, even with danger screaming toward them. Fear was an emotion their species had bred out of themselves long ago. Through the main view screen, Thakmore saw the Thane vessels gliding closer, looking like monstrous insects crafted from bone and sinew. While Krek ships were forged from pure steel and heavy armor, Thane vessels weren't built, they were grown. They were living ships, capable of healing their own wounds and even adapting to new weapons. The Thane had evolved on a planet where blistering radiation storms could peel the flesh from your bones in minutes. Colossal desert tempests could bury entire cities under mountains of sand. Their ancestors managed to survive by becoming a hive mind, sharing thoughts and reflexes faster than any single being could ever hope to process. They fought like a single, massive creature with thousands of bodies. From the core of her bioship, the Endless Hunger, Swarm Queen Zixth directed her fleet. Her consciousness was a river flowing through every single vessel in her armada. She could peer through 1,000 pairs of eyes and think with 1,000 minds at the same time. To her, the Kreks were just mindless brutes, fighting as individuals instead of as a unified whole. Her ship thrummed with organic power as it weaved between the asteroids. Its hull seemed to ripple like living skin, subtly changing its shape to better deflect enemy fire. Smaller bioships darted around her flagship like antibodies defending a vital organ. This whole war had kicked off over mining rights in the Kepler Drift. Both species desperately needed the rare materials scattered throughout the asteroid field. Neither was willing to share. Neither was capable of backing down. Their brutal home worlds had taught them both the same lesson: you take what you need by force, or you die. "Launch the hunter pods," Zixth commanded across the neural link connecting her to the entire fleet. Her order was not spoken, it was felt, an instantaneous impulse rippling through every Thane ship. In seconds, thousands of small attack craft burst from the bioships like seeds scattered from a ruptured pod. The Kreks answered instantly. Their warships unleashed a torrent of plasma cannons, bolts of energy hot enough to liquefy solid rock. The space between the asteroids erupted in a silent, blinding light show. Explosions blossomed like deadly flowers as ships on both sides absorbed devastating hits. Thakmore watched as one of his destroyers took a direct hit from a Thane acid missile. The corrosive weapon dissolved the ship's hull like it was tissue paper, venting atmosphere and the bodies of his warriors into the cold void. A hot surge of anger burned in his chest, but his face remained a mask of stone. Emotion was just another weakness you couldn't afford. The battle raged for hours. Ships dodged and weaved between the giant rocks, using them as cover from enemy fire. When smaller asteroids got in their way, they simply blasted them to rubble. The debris field grew thicker with every passing minute, making navigation even more treacherous. Neither side could get the upper hand. The Krek ships were tougher and more heavily armored, but the Thane vessels were quicker and coordinated their attacks with terrifying perfection. For every Krek ship that was destroyed, 2 Thane bioships were lost. But for every Thane casualty, the Kreks lost veteran warriors who were nearly impossible to replace. The 2 fleets had been fighting for so long, they knew each other's playbooks inside and out. Every new tactic was instantly met with a counter. Every surprise ambush was already expected. The war had become a miserable, grinding stalemate, a test of pure endurance where victory would simply go to the side that refused to die first. On far-off worlds, billions of civilians anxiously awaited news from the front lines. Krek's mothers sent their sons to die in that asteroid field, knowing that to retreat meant the total collapse of their empire. Thane drones toiled without rest to grow new bioships, understanding that defeat meant the extinction of their entire collective consciousness. The Galactic Council had tried to step in. Diplomats from peaceful species had offered to broker a truce. The Kreks and the Thane had both ignored them. For species who had evolved on worlds that were trying to kill them every single day, the soft-spoken creatures from garden planets could never grasp what was truly on the line. Other galactic powers watched the war with rising anxiety. The Kreks and the Thane were 2 of the most formidable military forces in the known galaxy. If their conflict spilled out of the Kepler drift, entire sectors of space could be laid to waste. But nobody had the muscle to make them stop. And so, the battle dragged on, just as it had for 3 long years. Ships tore each other apart in the silent darkness. Warriors died believing their sacrifice would finally bring victory. Commanders drew up battle plans, knowing full well that tomorrow would just bring more of the same endless, pointless violence. Neither Thakmor nor Zixth could possibly imagine that their war was about to be turned completely upside down. Neither of them could have ever predicted that a single ship from a species they had barely even registered was about to change everything. They fought on, trapped in their lethal dance, while somewhere out in the vast, cold emptiness, the USS Dakota was speeding toward them, about to alter the course of galactic history. The biggest battle of the entire 3-year war was about to ignite. Over 200 ships from both fleets were maneuvering into position among the asteroids. General Thakmor had thrown his entire reserve fleet into this one desperate gamble. Swarm Queen Zixth had grown a new wave of bioships specifically for this very moment. Both commanders knew, deep in their bones, that this day would decide the fate of the Kepler drift. The Iron Fang surged forward, leading the Krek's battle line. Massive dreadnoughts followed in its wake, their hulls bristling with plasma cannons and missile launchers. They moved in a perfect, disciplined formation, each ship a floating fortress of metal and raw power. On the far side of the asteroid field, the endless hunger pulsed with a menacing organic light, surrounded by a living cloud of Thane bioships. Their bone-white hulls rippled as they readied themselves for the fight. Acid missiles grew within their launch tubes like grotesque eggs about to hatch. Both fleets were just seconds from unleashing hell on each other when the impossible happened. Space itself seemed to rip apart right between them. A blinding flash of light bleached the darkness, and in an instant, a new ship was just there. The vessel was a complete unknown to both alien species. It was clearly manufactured, like a Krek ship, but it was smaller and had an elegance their brutal war machines lacked. And unlike the Thane bioships, it showed no hint of being a living thing. The hull was a simple, dull gray, decorated with markings that neither side had ever seen before. On the bridge of the USS Dakota, Captain Jake Morrison was just trying to figure out what fresh hell his ship had just jumped into. One second, they were cruising through hyperspace, heading home after a long survey mission. The next, they were floating in the middle of the largest gathering of warships he had ever laid eyes on. "What in the world is going on out there?" Morrison demanded of his tactical officer. Commander Lisa Grant was already frantically running scans of the ships surrounding them. The readings popping up on her console made her shake her head in disbelief. "Captain, I'm detecting over 200 hostile vessels, 2 separate fleets, sir, in full battle formation. It looks like they were about to open fire right when we dropped in." Imagine warping into the middle of a galactic grudge match you didn't even know existed. That's exactly what happened to Captain Morrison. The main view screen was a nightmare, massive alien ships boxing in his vessel from every angle. Some were like flying steel fortresses covered in weapons. Others looked like giant insects built from bone and sinew, all of them screaming war. "Are they targeting us?" Morrison asked, his voice tight. "Negative, sir," his first officer Grant replied. "Both fleets just stopped dead in their tracks. I think our arrival completely blindsided them." Over at communications, Pete Williams looked up, his eyes wide. "Captain, I'm getting hails from both sides. They're trying to figure out who we are, but I don't think they recognize our ship, our language, or anything about us." From her post, Chief Engineer Amy Torres chimed in, her voice steady despite the tension. "Fusion drives are running hot, Captain. If you give the word, I can get us out of here in a hurry." Morrison weighed his options. The Dakota was a heavy cruiser, a beast by human standards, but next to the alien dreadnought surrounding them, it looked like a toy. His crew of 180 was the best of the best, but they'd never seen anything like this. The human ship had materialized right in the no man's land between the two fleets, forcing an unexpected timeout in their battle. Neither the Krex nor the Thane wanted to be the first to open fire with a total wild card in the mix. On his own bridge, General Thakmore squinted at the strange ship on his screen. He'd been fighting Thane bioships for 3 long years, but this new vessel was something else entirely. The design was completely foreign, and his sensors couldn't get a lock on the species that built it. "Your orders, General?" his tactical officer asked. Thakmore was quiet for a long moment. The Krex lived for battle, but they weren't stupid. Picking a fight with an unknown enemy while you were already tangled up with another could be a fatal mistake. Miles away, Swarm Queen Zixther was just as baffled. Her massive hive mind sorted through thousands of thoughts at once, but not a single one of her drones had any data on this bizarre little ship. It was too small to be a real threat, yet its sudden appearance was deeply unsettling. Back on the Dakota, Science Officer Carl Bennett was running every scan he possibly could. "Captain, I'm getting some wild readings," he said. "Both fleets are definitely powering up for a massive fight. The energy signatures I'm seeing suggest weapons that could turn our ship into dust with just one shot." Morrison walked to the center of his bridge, the weight of his crew's gaze on him. He wasn't just thinking about their survival. He was thinking about the horrifying scale of the battle that was about to unfold. The destruction would be unimaginable. "Williams, can you open a channel to both fleets?" Morrison asked. "I can try, sir. Their communication tech is worlds apart, but I might be able to rig up a basic translation protocol." "Do it. Grant, give me a tactical rundown." "It's not pretty, Captain. We're outnumbered about 200 to 1. Our weapons probably wouldn't even scratch their paint," Grant said grimly. "But for now, they seem to be waiting to see what we do." It was in that moment that Morrison made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of running from the impossible odds, he chose to stay and try to stop the slaughter before it began. Williams opened the channels. "Tell them, we want to talk." "Sir, that might not be the best idea," Grant whispered. "We have no idea who we're dealing with." "They might see it as an act of war," Morrison replied calmly, "or they might be curious enough to hold their fire. Those ships were built for war, Grant, but that doesn't mean their commanders enjoy pointless destruction." And so the Dakota hung there, a tiny island of calm in a sea of silent, bristling warships. Human technology was hopelessly outmatched by the alien firepower all around them. But Captain Morrison was about to prove that sometimes having the courage to talk is more powerful than having the biggest guns. Both alien commanders received the message from the small human ship. Neither had ever heard of humans, but something about the ship's position felt more like a request than a threat. For the first time in 3 years, the war in the Kepler drift ground to a complete halt. Captain Morrison stood tall on his bridge, staring down two of the most fearsome military leaders in the galaxy. The main screen was split, showing General Thakmore on one side and Swarm Queen Zixther on the other. Neither of them looked happy about having their war interrupted. The Krex general was a terrifying sight. His reptilian face was a roadmap of old battle scars, and his yellow eyes blazed with a barely contained fury. Rows of razor-sharp teeth flashed when he spoke. The guy screamed, "Apex Predator!" The Thane Queen was different, but just as chilling. Her insect-like features were beyond anything a human could comprehend. A dozen eyes analyzed Morrison while her mandibles clicked together, a sound of pure irritation. Her voice, filtered through a translator, sounded like grinding metal. "Unknown vessel," Thakmore growled over the link. "You have entered a combat zone. Identify your species and your purpose here, or prepare for annihilation." Zixther's response was almost simultaneous. "Small ship, you interrupt the Hive's holy war. Explain yourself, or be dissolved by our bioweapons." Morrison had been in tight spots before, but this was a whole new level. He was talking to two leaders who could erase his ship from existence without a second thought. But the fact that they were talking, not shooting, gave him a sliver of hope. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the human starship USS Dakota," he said, his voice perfectly calm. "We arrived here by accident. We were on our way home from a deep space exploration mission and had no intention of interfering in your conflict." His direct answer seemed to catch both alien commanders off guard. Most species would have been screaming for mercy or trying to flee. This human captain showed no fear at all. "Human," Thakmore repeated, tasting the word. "Your species is not in any Krex Empire records. Your vessel is small and appears lightly armed. Why haven't you run away from a superior force?" Morrison took a deep breath. What he was about to say was either the most brilliant diplomatic move in history or cosmic suicide. "Because I believe both of your civilizations are making a monumental mistake." You could almost feel the temperature on both alien bridges drop. Zixther's mandibles began clicking frantically, a clear sign she was agitated. Thakmore's claws audibly scraped against the metal of his command console. "You dare to judge the Krex?" Thakmore snarled. "We have conquered a dozen worlds with our strength and honor. Our warriors have no equal in this galaxy." "The hive mind is the product of centuries of evolution," Zixther added. "Our unity has crushed countless foes. No single species could possibly understand our power." Morrison gave a respectful nod. "I don't doubt your strength or your honor. It's clear both of your people have overcome incredible odds to survive. And that's exactly why this war is such a tragic waste." He signaled to his science officer, Carl Bennett, who came forward with a data tablet. "For the last 2 years, we've been charting the far outer rim of the galaxy. and what we found out there should worry every single thinking being. Bennett brought up a holographic display showing the dark, empty space beyond the known star charts. Bizarre energy signatures were pulsing in the void between stars, patterns that didn't match anything in the galactic databases. These energy fields are enormous, Bennett explained. Whatever is creating them is bigger than anything we've ever seen. The power levels they're putting out suggest a technology that would make this entire war look like kids fighting over a sandbox. The two alien commanders stared at the data, their expressions shifting from anger to intense focus. Their species had survived for so long precisely because they never ignored a potential threat. And this was a threat unlike any other. "This could be a trick," Thakmore said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "The hive mind will need proof of these claims," Zixthar added. Morrison moved closer to the screen. "I'm willing to give you all of our sensor data to analyze, but first, I want to suggest something that might sound crazy." He paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. His next words could either unite 3 species or get them all killed. "I propose a 3-way negotiation, not about surrender or conquest, a talk between equals about the very real threat that's coming for all of us." The silence that followed was so complete it was almost a physical force. Both alien commanders looked at Morrison like he'd just grown a second head. In their entire history, wars only ended in total victory or total annihilation, never with a conversation. Thakmore was the first to speak. "You talk of equals, human. Our smallest gunship could destroy you with a single shot. By what right do you claim to be our equal?" Morrison actually smiled, a simple, confident expression that seemed to confuse both aliens. "Because humanity also comes from a death world," he said. "We just learned some very different lessons about what it takes to survive." He nodded to Commander Grant, who filled the holographic display with images of a beautiful, chaotic, and dangerous blue-green planet called Earth. From space, our home looked like a serene blue and white jewel, but that pretty picture was a lie. "Earth," Captain Morrison began, "has weather that can obliterate a city in the time it takes to brew coffee. It has earthquakes that can tear continents apart and volcanoes that can blot out the sun. For centuries, we grew up dodging predators that hunted in teams and surviving disasters that struck without a single warning." The screen flashed with images of monster hurricanes, city-swallowing tsunamis, and fiery volcanic blasts, storms that made anything on the alien homeworlds look like a spring shower. "But instead of becoming just warriors or a single hive mind," Morrison said, "we learned how to work together as unique individuals. We found our greatest power not in being the same, but in being different." All of Zixthar's eyes blinked, suddenly fascinated by the human captain. "Your species survived that nightmare by cooperating, not conquering?" she buzzed. "Cooperation and adaptation," Morrison replied with a nod. "We figured out how to make our differences our biggest weapon, and that's exactly what I'm offering to you now." General Thakmore studied the human, a flicker of respect in his reptilian eyes. Any race that could claw its way to the stars from a world that hostile was worth listening to, no matter how strange their ideas were. "So what's your proposal, human captain?" the Krex general rumbled. Morrison met the gaze of both alien leaders. "Meet me, neutral territory, small teams only. Let's talk about this new threat and see if 3 very different ways of surviving might be stronger than one." "The hive does not bargain with lone minds," Zixthara stated, though the venom in her voice was gone. "And the Krex do not show strength by compromising," Thakmore added, his claws tapping on the table. Morrison nodded calmly. "I'm not asking you to be weak. I'm asking you to be smart. If there's something out there strong enough to wipe us all out, don't you think we should understand it before we turn on each other?" A heavy silence fell over the room. The galactic war they'd been waging for decades suddenly felt petty compared to a potential enemy lurking in the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge. Finally, Thakmor grunted. "The Krex will entertain your idea, human. But if this is a trick, I promise your end will be slow and agonizing." Zixthara added, "The Hive is curious about your people and your data. We will agree to a temporary halt in hostilities to analyze the situation." A wave of relief washed over Morrison. He'd actually done it, convinced two of the galaxy's deadliest races to put down their weapons and talk. But that was the easy part. Now, he had to prove that working together was better than wiping each other out. Habitat Station Echo hung in the silent void between the two colossal alien fleets. The little human-made station was built for moments just like this, a place for different species to meet on neutral ground. It was Morrison's choice for their unprecedented three-way summit. The station's main meeting room had been customized to handle the needs of all three groups. Special environmental systems created 3 different atmospheric zones. The Krex needed blistering heat and crushing gravity, while the Zith required low humidity and a specific kind of radiation. Humans, meanwhile, could handle just about anything, a fact that impressed the aliens more than they'd ever admit. General Thakmor was the first to arrive, flanked by 2 of his fiercest warriors. The Krex never took off their battle armor, even here. Their weapons were on the ship, but with their natural claws and raw power, they were always armed. Swarm Queen Zixthara shimmered into existence via a biotransport pod, 3 of her drones buzzing around her, their multifaceted eyes scanning everything for danger. The Zith moved in perfect, unnerving unison, like they all shared the same brain. Captain Morrison walked into the room with Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Murphy and Dr. Kate Sullivan. Murphy, the head of the Marines on the Dakota, was his tactical muscle. Sullivan was their top xenobiologist, an expert on alien life. The 3 groups took their places at a triangular table, each sizing up the others. You could practically feel the tension in the air. "Before we get into the mystery threat," Morrison started, "I think it's important we understand each other. Our people have never collaborated before. If we're going to pull this off, we need trust." Thakmor's blazing yellow eyes locked onto the captain. "The Krex don't trust human. Trust is earned on the battlefield and paid for in blood." "The Hive demands total unity," Zixthara buzzed. "Individual minds are incapable of true cooperation. You must surrender your chaotic thoughts." Dr. Sullivan leaned in. "If I may, tell us about your homes. Knowing where we come from might help us see why we fight the way we do." Thakmor puffed out his chest with pride. "Krex Prime is a planet of fire and rock. The gravity is 3 times what your species could endure. Volcanoes constantly spew poison into the air. Only the strongest among us even make it to adulthood. The weak are culled before they can pass on their frail genes." One of his guards projected a hologram of their world. Jagged black mountains clawed at a sky choked with ash, while rivers of molten lava scarred the landscape. Their cities looked more like bunkers, built to survive non-stop earthquakes. "On Krex Prime, every single day is a fight to the death," Thakmor boomed. "We learned early on that only absolute strength matters. Cooperation is a weakness that will get you killed." Zixthara's mandibles clicked softly. The Zith evolved on Nexus 7, a world scorched by radiation so intense it would sterilize most planets. Massive solar flares routinely tear away our atmosphere. The desert winds carry sand sharp enough to peel the flesh from your bones. Her drones showed images of their home, an endless desert under a blistering sun, with bizarre crystal spires reaching up from the sand. Billions of Zith lived in perfect harmony in cities deep underground. Survival for one was impossible on Nexus 7, the Queen explained. Only by uniting our minds could we endure. The hive became one being in many bodies. The individual thought is a relic. It was inefficient, so we erased it. Both aliens now stared at Morrison, waiting. They had shown him their brutal origins. Now they wanted to see what kind of hellhole created humanity. Morrison gave Dr. Sullivan the signal. A hologram of Earth appeared, looking deceptively calm with its blue seas and swirling white clouds. Earth looks peaceful from a distance, Sullivan said, but in reality, it's one of the most violent planets ever discovered. Our world has more catastrophic weather than any other known planet. The display shifted, showing colossal hurricanes that could flatten whole countries, tornadoes that tore scars across continents, earthquakes that swallowed cities whole, and volcanoes that triggered global winters. Earth has ice ages that last for thousands of years, she went on. Asteroid strikes that cause worldwide extinctions, floods that literally redraw the maps. Our ancestors didn't just survive one kind of disaster. They survived dozens of them, all at once. Thakmore leaned forward, his arrogance replaced with genuine curiosity. How did your people endure such chaos without becoming single-minded killers? Morrison stepped in. Because different disasters needed different answers. You can't punch a hurricane into submission, and you can't outthink an ice age with one mind. The images now showed humans building earthquake-proof cities, forming communities to survive floods, and adapting to live in deserts, mountains, and frozen tundras. Humans survived by becoming the ultimate adapters, Morrison said. We learned to work together as individuals, keeping our unique minds. We made our differences our greatest asset. Lieutenant Colonel Murphy then stood up and walked to the center of the room. Every alien eye was locked on him. He was clearly a warrior. "May I show you something?" Murphy asked. He then flowed through a series of combat movements that demonstrated human speed and strategy. His style was a mesmerizing, unpredictable dance, blending techniques from a dozen different disciplines. He showed how a human soldier could instantly change their entire fighting style to counter a new threat. Both the Kreks and the Zith were stunned. They had never seen anything like it. "Fascinating," Thakmore admitted. "Your warrior blends pure strength with cunning. That is not something we see from Death World species." Zixthara's eyes followed Murphy's every move. His tactics are in constant flux. There is no pattern for the hive to analyze. It is inefficient, and yet it works. Dr. Sullivan smiled. That's humanity's secret. We learned that being the most efficient isn't always the best way to win. Sometimes you need a messy, creative, and totally unpredictable plan B. Sullivan pulled up images of human civilization, not of weapons, but of art. She showed them sprawling cities where a dozen architectural styles coexisted beautifully, and technologies that blended wildly different scientific fields. We realized a long time ago that our greatest strength wasn't being the toughest or the most united, Morrison explained, his voice calm but firm. It was our ability to adapt, to come up with solutions from angles nobody else even knew existed. He then stood, locking eyes with both alien commanders. "And that's what I'm offering you now. We're facing a threat so massive that one single strategy is doomed to fail. But 3 different minds working together? We might just find a way to survive that none of us could find alone." The hulking warrior, Thakmore, was silent for a long time, letting the human's words sink in. He couldn't wrap his head around it. These small, fragile beings had stared down challenges that would have made his own battle-hardened people tremble. Zixathra's hive mind, on the other hand, was a storm of calculations. To her kind, the human way of doing things was pure chaos, a horribly inefficient mess. But the proof was right there in front of her. They had reached the stars. "Your people are far more dangerous than we ever imagined," Takmor finally growled. "Not because of your ships, but because of your minds." Zixathra added, her voice a chorus of thoughts. "The hive finds human adaptability unsettling, yet potentially useful. It seems there are paths to survival we have not yet considered." Morrison gave a slight nod. "Good. Then you're ready to see what our deep space probe found at the edge of the galaxy and why we're going to need every trick in the book to survive what's coming." The real meeting was about to begin. The room went dead silent as Science Officer Carl Bennett brought the sensor data to life. A holographic map of the galaxy's outer rim appeared, a place where the stars thinned out into an endless, crushing blackness. But the void wasn't empty. Giant pulsing energy signatures flickered in the dark between galaxies. The readings didn't match anything in any known database. Whatever was making them was operating on a scale that made entire star systems look like tiny specks of dust. General Takmor's eyes narrowed, his warrior instincts on high alert. "Those aren't natural," he rumbled. "The energy patterns, they suggest something was built out there, structures bigger than our homeworlds." The Swarm Queen. Zixathra's mind raced, processing the data at a speed no single brain could match. "The power needed for signatures like these," she buzzed, "would drain entire stars. This technology is beyond anything in this galaxy." Captain Morrison's expression was grim. "Our science team thinks these things have been asleep for millions of years. The bad news? They're starting to wake up." "Something is stirring out there," Bennett said, pointing to specific readings on the holo display. "The energy output has jumped by 40% in the last 6 months alone. If that keeps up, whatever this thing is will be fully powered on in less than 2 years." The weight of that statement settled over the room. All three of them, leaders of powerful civilizations, were staring at proof of a technology that could wipe out every single living thing in the galaxy. "What do your records say about that part of space?" Morrison asked the aliens. Takmor checked his tactical logs. "Our explorers went there 300 years ago. They reported nothing but empty void and turned back. We never went back." Zixathra added, "The Hive sent probes to the galactic rim 200 years ago. We lost contact with all of them. They simply vanished." Dr. Sullivan leaned forward, her voice low. "What if they weren't destroyed by some accident? What if they were taken, absorbed by whatever is out there?" A chill ran through the room. An enemy that could swallow entire fleets without a single distress call was a monster beyond their darkest nightmares. Morrison stepped into the center of the room. "This is why I called you here. Alone, each of us will be picked off one by one. But together, we might just have a chance." Takmor's scarred face twisted in a skeptical sneer. "The Krex Empire has over 300 warships. Our cannons can crack a planet in half. What could your 12 little human ships possibly add to that?" Morrison just smiled. "Commander Grant, please show them our homework." A new hologram lit up the room, showing battle formations that blended all three of their strengths. "Krex dreadnoughts have the best armor and the biggest guns," Grant explained. "Thane bioships have perfect coordination and can adapt to anything. And human ships, we bring strategic unpredictability to the fight." The simulation played out. The Krex ships formed a wall of iron, punching holes in enemy lines. The Thane ships swarmed the flanks, a perfectly synchronized tide of destruction. And weaving between them were the human ships, patching holes, exploiting weaknesses, and changing their roles on the fly. "Your strengths amplify each other," Grant said. "Krex armor protects the Thane swarms. Thane coordination makes Krex firepower even deadlier, and human adaptability holds it all together." Zixathra's insectoid mandibles clicked together, a sign of interest. The hive sees the logic in this. These combined tactics could work. But Takmor wasn't sold. Simulations are just theories. The battlefield is where truth is found. Lieutenant Colonel Murphy stepped forward. Then let's find out. General, we propose joint training exercises. Let us prove to you this can work. The suggestion was insane. Just yesterday, they were trying to kill each other. Now, they were supposed to train together? Takmor's warrior pride screamed at him to refuse, but the cold, hard logic was undeniable. And how do we know you won't betray us the second our backs are turned? The Krex general demanded. Morrison looked him straight in the eye. The same way you trust any soldier in a foxhole, through shared danger and proven results. That's when Chief Engineer Amy Torres, who had been silent the whole time, spoke up. Captain, if I may, I want to show our guests a little something about human engineering. She pulled up a schematic of the Dakota's fusion drive. Krex ships are built for brute force, she explained. Thane ships are grown for efficiency. Human ships are built to be changed. She showed them how the fusion drives could be completely reconfigured in a matter of hours. The same engine that was used for a long-range science mission could be tweaked for heavy combat or a rescue operation. We don't build the biggest guns or the fastest ships, Torres said proudly. We build systems that can become whatever we need them to be. That impressed the aliens more than any weapon could have. The ability to adapt technology that fast was a game changer. Suddenly, red lights flashed and alarms blared through the station. Bennett scrambled to his console, his face turning ghost white. Captain, massive energy spikes from the galactic rim. The structures, their power output just jumped by 300%. The hologram shifted, showing the terrifying new data. The ancient machines were awake. After millions of years, something was stirring. Morrison turned to the alien commanders. Well, gentlemen, it looks like we don't have 2 years after all. I think they know we're here. This was it. The moment of truth. Takmor stood, his warrior's doubt finally washed away by the sheer scale of the threat. The Krex Empire is with you. Our fleet will fight by your side. Zixathra's many eyes reflected the flashing red lights. The hive mind agrees. Cooperation is the only logical path. Our bioships will join your fleet. A wave of relief washed over Morrison. Then let's show this galaxy what happens when you mess with the Death Worlders. Within hours, the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen was taking shape. Massive Krex dreadnoughts fell into formation with living Thane vessels and sleek human cruisers. Soldiers who had been enemies that very morning were now brothers in arms. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the Dakota, watching the incredible sight. Lieutenant Commander Tony Rodriguez laid in their course, straight toward the heart of the unknown threat. All fleets report ready, Captain, the communications officer announced. Morrison stared into the endless dark ahead. Something ancient and terrible was waiting for them. But for the first time, humanity and its new allies were ready to face it together. Let's go, Morrison said, a determined glint in his eye. Let's show them what we can do when we stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The Alliance fleet vanished into hyperspace, a united force racing toward a shared destiny.